Let's talk about requirements on your modules in Canvas. So, using requirements on your modules is actually what I would consider to be an intermediate or an advanced skill, but it's one that is definitely worth your time. So let's actually start by looking at one of my modules that does not, oops, I clicked on the wrong thing, that does not actually have requirements on it. So you can see kind of the difference between the two. So this is my STEMS module, and you will see there's nothing listed here. There's nothing except for points listed under each item, which means this module doesn't have any requirements or prerequisites set on it. Here's what that means. A student can do this assignment and then take the quiz and then move on and then skip this and then continue to the next thing and then skip this one. Whereas if I had it set up with requirements, I could do things like say, you cannot take the quiz until you submit the STEMS assignment, or you cannot move on to STEMS List B until you can make a 60 or higher on STEMS Quiz A. That's what we mean by requirements. You set up actual standards for your students with these requirements or prerequisites, and you hold them to it. Canvas actually holds them to it for you, which makes it a little bit easier than you having to do it on your own and keep up with it. Here is what a module looks like with requirements. So you see how now it says something up here, and beside all of the items, there's little words like mark done, submit, things like that. And what that means is when students start with this Victorian Etiquette Edpuzzle video, they're going to watch it, and then they'll have to mark it done in order to move on to the next thing, which is a game, which they'll have to mark done so they can move on to the fun quiz. And then when they mark that done, they'll move on to the questions, which is an actual assignment. And in order to move on to the next thing, they have to actually turn in this assignment. That's what submit means. And then it goes down from there. The other requirement that you can set is one that talks about a certain score. And I can show you that here on my rhetoric module. So you'll see it's the same kind of prerequisites. And then this is a post-assessment or a quiz. And notice that it says score at least 50. So students have to make a 50 or higher on this pathos quiz before they can move on to logos. And this is just one way, again, I can really check their understanding. So let's talk about how to set this up. So you're going to need to click on this stoplight or the 3 dots at the top of the module. Now keep in mind, you can't do this until you already have things in your module for you to do this too. So you're going to click that and then click Edit. And when you click Edit, it's going to bring up all these options. So you're going to see you could lock the module until a certain date. You could add prerequisites. So for instance, my Persuasive Techniques module has a prerequisite on it that they have to finish this rhetoric module before they can start it. And then here's requirements. So I can click that they must complete all of them, and then that they must move through them in sequential order, meaning the order they go through has to match the order you had them listed in the module. You also could select complete one of these requirements. I never really used that one, but it could be good if, for instance, like you had all these things they needed to do in the essay, but then they had to turn in the essay no matter what. You could click that one. And then you'll individually pull up each assignment or page or whatever it is, discussion, quiz, and then you're going to pick from these requirements. So if it's a page, you're a lot more limited on what you can have them do with it. So you can say view the item, which means if they click on the page and look at it, the next thing is going to automatically unlock. Mark as done is a little bit more intensive for them because they're going to have to click a green check mark at the top of the page that says mark as done, and then it will say complete, and then the next thing will unlock. And then contribute to the page means they have to click on the page and do something with it. So for instance, that could be helpful with something like Padlet. If it's an assignment, you have more options. So this Ed puzzle is an assignment. So you'll notice you have the view the item, mark as done, just like the other one. But you also have submit the assignment, which means once they turn it in, then the next thing will unlock. And then score at least, which means they have to achieve a certain score in order to move on to the next thing. If they don't, then they'll have to try again. Here's some things to keep in mind with all of these options. Mark as done is sometimes problematic because students can technically mark it done even if they haven't done it, which is just something to keep in mind. For instance, this video right here. Students could mark it done before they've actually watched the video, but it is another way to just check to see if they've done it. Submit the assignment is also sometimes troublesome for specific students because it means even if they turn in a blank doc or a text box with one period in it, they've technically submitted the assignment and can move on. Obviously, they're not going to make a good score, but it's just something to keep in mind. Another issue that can come up is with score at least. The issue here is unless the quiz is self-grading, students cannot move on until you have graded the assignment or the discussion or the quiz. I usually use the score at least for post-assessments or quizzes, things that Canvas can go ahead and grade for me. When I've used score at least for assignments in the past, it's been a little bit troublesome in that some students get blocked from completing more work because I'm behind in my grading, which is never a good sign. So keep that in mind if you want to use this option. So these are how it's set up, and then obviously this is a very big module, so it has a lot of items in it. If I changed my mind, I could hit the X and delete that requirement, but for right now, everything is good. This is the prerequisites I was talking about. So this module is not finished yet. I'm still working on it. But you'll see I've added this prerequisite. So they have to finish this module before this one will unlock or open for them. Something else to keep in mind when you're using requirements is obviously we know some students don't come to school often or whatever. They're behind or they're slow workers. And these requirements help hold them accountable, but they also can hold them back. I did have students get frustrated when they felt like they were behind because we as a class may be working on ethos, but they may still be working on pathos. So something to keep in mind is those students may need extra help from you. They may need more guidance. They may need more structure. So what I would do is if there were kids that were still working on pathos while we were working on logos, I made sure that I was either sitting with them in a small group or I was working with them, or my co-teacher was, or we were checking on them, or I was holding them for remediation time because they were behind. These are all things to just keep in mind as you're using requirements. Another thing to keep in mind is you're going to have to teach your students how to use some of these requirements. For example, the mark done. If you are not specifically giving students instructions to mark it done, then they may not do it. So what I do is I will put, when you are finished, click the button at the top of the screen that says mark as done. Then you will be able to hit next, which is down here, and move on to the next thing. If you don't tell your students that, then they are probably going to get really angry that they can't move on or frustrated. And you have to spend some class time actually teaching them about these requirements. Another thing to keep in mind is when we were talking about the quizzes, saying they have to score at least a 50, that also means I have to make this post-assessment so that they can attempt it multiple times. Because if the first time they take it, let's say they make a 20. Okay, well, that means they literally cannot do anything else in the module until they can score a 50 on this quiz. So if I have it so that they can only take it one time, I'm essentially saying you get a 0 for the rest of the module, which is not good. So make sure that you give them on quizzes multiple attempts, or if it's an assignment, that they can have unlimited attempts or a certain amount. I could technically say you have 3 times to do this, but I just want to not have to do any more back-end work than I need to, so I just set it up like that from the beginning. And that is how I use requirements and prerequisites on my modules in Canvas, and I hope that this was super helpful for you. It has been very effective in helping me with my students and holding them accountable.